All right. All right. So, welcome to How to Change Your Money Story with me, Cassie Parks. One of my friends a long time ago, she did this thing where she named, like, she gave you a title, and Money Maven was the title because a maven is somebody who's learned something and they come back and they teach others. So, I thought that was a fun just title to put on here today. Um, So you are definitely in the right place today. If you want to welcome more money into your life, just go ahead and hit the raise your hand if that's you. And you could do that for any of these. Awesome. I love it. You're here in the right place. If you've tried to manifest more money with little or no success, so maybe you've got some success, but maybe not a ton, you're also in the right place. If you're good at manifesting parking spots, but you'd really like to manifest the cash to put a new car in that parking spot, you feel stuck when it comes to money and having more of it. Maybe you want to be one of those people, the ones who money flows to easily. And just before we dive right into it, I just want to ask you and give you um, the opportunity to give yourself permission to be here for the next hour. So close out of Facebook, shut your office door, maybe turn off the notifications on your phone, and really give yourself the gift of this next hour. Because what I know and what I've learned, we'll talk about in a second, is that when you're able to shift your money story, change your money story, you can really shift your whole life. Today, you're going to learn why people don't have all the money they want, what gets in the way of changing your money story, because there's some things that can go on that can keep you from changing your money story, and really what's possible when you do change your money story. I'll also talk to you about how to change your money story and give you the steps to do that. As I said, I am Cassie Parks, and I changed my money story from making money takes long, hard hours. That definitely was what I used to. That was the story that operated and ran my life. To what I would call my story now: money flows easily to me. I retired at 32 from my corporate job. I and of course now I coach, so I'm not retired, but that's what my friends say. I'm the creator of the Manifest 10K course, which has taught almost 2,000 people how to improve their money mindset and how to naturally and easily change their money story. I've helped people manifest as much as $100,000 in 90 days. So let's talk a little bit about my old money story again. Making money takes long, hard hours. That was the title. And with a title like that, you can guess how the story goes. Quite often, you can pick up a book or a novel or a self-help book, and you can figure out what's going to be inside the pages, right, of that story. So inside my pages of, how this played out in my life is that, I thought in order to make a lot of money, I'm going to have to work a lot of hours. And I operated from that mindset for a long time. And one of the ways that crept up is, my corporate job, if I'd get a raise, then I'd find myself having to create more work and put in more hours. And this is the only way I knew that. I thought I had to take a lot of long hours because that's what my dad did. He ended up, him and my mom are in a pretty financially good place. And I thought that only happened when you had to put in all these really, really, really long hours. And then you had to get lucky. And we'll talk about how that was something that my dad believed as well. Um, I knew I wanted to have money, but I also knew I didn't want to work that many hours. It just wasn't in me. I'm somebody who can work hard. And there was times in my life where I worked 12, 14 hours, 3 different jobs. I didn't really mind it. The thing was, I didn't want to have to do that forever. That's my whole thing. So my current money story: money flows easily to me. I'm living the life I always wanted. So that's what happens inside my story when the title is money flows easily to me. I'm truly living the life that I've always dreamed of, literally living in a place that I never thought would be possible, but I always wanted to. I am financially independent, which means that, if I wanted to quit working, if I wanted to quit coaching tomorrow, other than fulfilling the obligations that I have to my current clients, I could do that. I could walk away and I could pay my bills. And that was something that was important to me. And that was really why I wanted to change my money story, because I wanted that to be true. I wanted that to be a chapter, right? Financial independence. And I'm the person that people think about when they think about having more money in their life. So I'll have friends, a friend called me a couple weeks ago and he's like, hey, have you ever thought about this? He's like, I mean, I know you thought about this because if there's a way to have more money, you've thought about it. And that's just who I am. So this is a picture of me living the life that I always dreamed of. This is in Italy. This is an infinity pool that looked out over an olive grove in a vineyard. Super fun hanging out with some of my wonderful, wonderful friends and just growing my business, which was something that I literally always dreamed about. And in the back, you can see the Mediterranean. And this is Michelle. And this is just one of the things that happens in her life. And we'll talk a little bit more about her. And I like to relate more than one story as I'm teaching. I like to pull in other people's story because I think we just see things differently when we can see more than one story. So, Michelle is making more money and working less since we've been working together in about the last 90 days. And, just raise your hand if you'd like to work less and make more money. So the key to that, love it. Thank you all for raising your hands. And that's why you're here. And the key really we're going to talk about what Michelle's story was. And it didn't involve working less and making more. But we're going to talk about, because the key is changing your money story and really developing a new story that supports what you want in the life you want. So here's why people have a hard time changing their money story. You've been telling this story for a long time. Whatever it is, you started writing your money story as a child without probably being conscious of it or thinking of it, obviously, as a child. It's based on that story you've created experiences to match. And then you tell the story because you have more experiences that match that story. So you keep telling the story. And then you keep seeing that story coming true. And so your money story is different than some other stories you have in your life because it's been going on for so long. Here's how my money story evolved. My dad worked a lot, like 80 plus hours a week. He worked the weekends most of the time. He had every other Sunday off for sure. And so that impacted me, right? I thought to live, like you had to work all this time, and my mom also worked. So it wasn't just like one person was working. One of the things that shaped my money story that I can see as an adult was it's not silly, but it's the way that just to give you an example of the way that our minds work. One of the reasons I thought we didn't have a lot of money, and we were comfortable, we weren't, rich, we weren't upper middle class, but like we only had one car. And a lot of the people that I knew that were in my life, my friends and such, they had 2 cars. Well, now that I know, and I'm an adult, like I know we only had one car because my dad had a work car. And so my parents were financially savvy and they were saving money by not having 2 cars. But it was just one of those things that was like, oh, we don't have a lot and my dad has to work harder. And that just started shaping my story. Conversations. I had conversations with my dad. If you've read some of my books, you know about some of them. A lot of my money story comes from him. But, we would have conversations like, I'm fortunate. Like people don't make as much money as I make. Like this is a big deal. And I thought, well, man, the only way to get there again is to work all those hours. And by getting lucky. We once had a conversation. He told me he got lucky 7 times in his career. And so as a teenager or preteen and tween, when your mind is creating these stories, you're like, how do I plan to get lucky? I got to work a lot and I have to plan to get lucky. And that's kind of how my story evolved. I felt like I would never make a lot of money because I knew I didn't and couldn't work as hard as my dad. I talked about that. I didn't mind working hard. I didn't mind doing it, my early 20s, but I knew I didn't want to do that my entire life. And then again, I thought I had to get lucky and I didn't know how do you plan to get lucky? And I really thought as I created my story that I had to have time or money. And I like to give, this is just part of how that story evolved and where it's evolved from. My first job after college, I made $12 an hour with no benefits. And this just came up because I was talking to a couple of my family members that are around my age about it the other day. And I made the least of anyone. And so I just like to point that fact out, because you can come from anywhere and you can change your money story. So I talked about Michelle a little bit. You saw her picture. She's working less and making more. So here's where Michelle's money story was really, I can't financially take care of myself. That was what created everything in it. That's what created the chapters, which put her in survival mode. It made her act out of desperation, so she couldn't wait for anything because she didn't think there would be enough. And she created a big debt because there was opportunity to do that, because she felt like she couldn't take care of herself. So there was this, having to create that. And now she can see how that was created, that we're on the other side of her money story. And she's in her second marriage, and both of her husbands said to her, "You're not good with money." So that was a way that her money story played out into her experience. And then it kept evolving her story and thinking that she's not good with money, which affects everything. So what is your current money story? If you were to just have to title it, you don't have to tell me the names of the chapters, but just take a quick second, and you don't even have to share it out loud. Maybe just write it down. What do you think the title of your current money story is that's creating all the chapters and experiences that you're having? I'll give you just a second to jot that down before we move on. So how is your money story playing out in your life right now? Is it that there's not enough money? You creating more debt? Making short-term instead of long-term decisions? Because our story affects that, how we make decisions. If you are making more money, do you have to work harder? You feel like there's never enough. You're working harder, but you're getting further behind. Maybe it means you're not charging enough, or you're not able to draw in clients. Just kind of take a second and take a mental note of how that story is playing out in your life. And there's more ways than this that it can play out. Your money story is creating your current money experience. And if you want to change that experience, you have to change your money story. Maybe you've tried to change your money story before. You've tried thinking positive, you've visualized, you've done a vision board, fixed your limiting beliefs, maybe a whole list of things to try and change your money story, because somewhere along the way you heard that this was important, right? And you want a different title. So let's talk about, why is it hard to change your money story? And I'm going to go through all these individually, but I'm just going to read them off first, just to kind of get your brain to start thinking about this. Again, it's been with you since birth. Money is involved in almost everything every day. Your brain doesn't necessarily want you to change, and we'll talk more about all of these. You have a list of things that you're doing instead of becoming the person who has money. You're trying to fix all your limiting beliefs. When you think it isn't working, you do more. You're not clear about what you want. You lack focus. Often your beliefs about debt can impact how you can change your story. And you might not be noticing when it's working. So let's talk about this. Again, your story has been with you since birth. You've been creating your money story since you were born. Remember Michelle? Like, her survival mode, that story, I can't take care of myself, started with her mom. Her mom was a single mom, had trouble making it. And Michelle ended up in that same place and experienced that. And even though, when she was married and things were fine, has still felt like that until recently. She couldn't take care of herself. And in turn created situations where she wasn't able to take care of herself until she did some work on her money story. Money is involved in almost everything every day. So some things are easier to change because there's a less natural focus on them. But money, it comes up in everyday stuff all the time. Comes up, if you want to buy a coffee, if you're saving that money, or if you're buying coffee on the way to work. It comes up because you go to work or you do your business. Like, often you need to make enough money so that you can keep doing that. It comes up, in the investment you're making for where you live, in your car, putting gas in your car. It can come up, you know, when you go to dinner and the moment comes where it's like, you know, do I do separate checks? And somebody's like, oh no, we'll just split it, right? And you're like, oh, I only had a salad. They had 4 drinks, right? It comes up in all of these situations a lot of the time in our life. Which means it takes more discipline to change your thoughts because it's so involved. You know, think about the parking spot. You're only thinking about manifesting a parking spot when you're on your way to the store. You don't have a lot of negative thoughts probably about not getting a parking spot all day. You're not going around all day, like every 5 minutes thinking about how getting a parking spot is going to impact your life. But you probably might, if your money story isn't where you want it, be doing that when it comes to money. And then money can feel more important than other things, right? Because it impacts so much of what we do, because it has that daily impact, it can feel more important, which can create more stress or more panic or more worry, right? Than we would normally have about other things. Because some things you can just put away, but because money touches so much of our life, it's harder to just put it away. Therefore, it feels more important. Your brain doesn't really want you to change. And this is how we've evolved. It's how we've gotten here, right? Your brain really wants to keep things the same because that's safe. Your brain isn't sure, like, even if you don't have a lot of money right now, or you don't feel like you have a lot of money, your brain knows what to do. You know, you have a certain amount and you've been surviving on that, and your brain is like, we got this, even if it's hard, even if we have to stress at the end of the month, even if we have to do this, that, and the other, we always know how to make it work. But your brain doesn't necessarily know what it's like to have more money. And so there's things rolling around in it, like, well, what would we do with that money? Where would it go? What would change? Would it just bring more stress? All these things. And so your brain helps you resist because it's trying to keep you safe. And while it doesn't make logical sense why more money wouldn't be safe, right? Because you're going, that would make me feel so much safer probably to have more money. Your brain doesn't know that because it's different and it's not seeing the part that would be easier. So it might be hard for you to change your money story. And again, everybody probably has about 1 to 3 of these things that I'm going over right now. So they probably don't all apply to you. They might all apply to you, and that's okay. But there's probably 1 to 3 that are really playing out the most in your life. So you have a list of things that you are doing rather than becoming a person who has money. Changing your money story is all about becoming a different character, right, in the story. As you can't be the same character and expect to be living a different story. You have to become the person who's the main character of your new money story. And that doesn't happen by just doing a list of things, by just making a vision board. That can be part of the process, but it just can't be a thing that you check off the list. You know, visualizing, once a week for 5 minutes. There's a lot of other hours and minutes in the day than that 5 minutes. And it's more important who you're becoming than the things that you're doing. And so one of the reasons it can be hard to change your money story is because you're focused on that list of things that you're doing that you think is going to change your story, rather than becoming the person who has money, who's the leading character in your new money story. Another thing that gets in the way is that you're trying to fix all of your limiting beliefs, and I did this like a lot. I tried to fix that belief that I had to work really hard to have money. And what kept coming up is every time there wasn't the money that I wanted in my life, then I went back and I'm like, oh, I must need to fix this belief, some version of it. And finally I realized that didn't work. I needed to just start writing the new story. When you think it isn't working, you do more. So when you're like, it's not working, I'm not changing my money story, you start doing more things to try and change your money story, which in turn just tells yourself it's not working. You're also doing more of that list, and you're not becoming that character in the story. You're not clear about what you want. So often, this is the root of why it's hard to change someone's money story. It's like, I just want more money. But that's, does that mean when 5 cents shows up on the ground, you're going to be happy because that's more money? No. And so if you're not clear about what you want, it's really hard to change your story, right? Think about if you were writing a fiction book and you weren't clear whether it was a romance novel or a, a sci-fi thriller or, a historic novel. And I realize all those things can be put together, but you have to start out with the intention to put them together. You can't just start out and say, when I pick up and I start writing on Monday, it's going to be a romance novel. Tuesday, historical fiction. Thursday, some sort of sci-fi. You have to be clear about what you want the outcome of that story to be. And so often, people don't go into changing their money story being clear about what they want. You lack focus on what you actually do want. So often you're so trapped in your story because, again, it's been there since birth. It's been creating since birth, until you became conscious of it and maybe started trying to change it. But because it's been there since birth, you have created experiences that support that story. And then you believe that story even more and you create more experiences. So often when you think you're focusing on what you want and how to change that story, you're not, because that focus isn't, you just lack the ability to see clearly how you're perpetuating the story. And this happens, a lot. I get this with my clients when I'm working with someone to change their money story, or change anything for that matter. And oftentimes for me, it's like, yeah, this is the same thing. It's just different words. And until I point it out, they don't realize it because, and they'll go, well, why was that easy for you to see? Well, because we can't see our own forest for our trees. It's easy for someone else to see it, but often we can't see it, especially in the case of something like our money story that has been around so long and that you've been living for so long. You might have beliefs about debt that aren't helpful. And this can get in the way because often if you're still beating yourself up about debt, if you're still thinking, I shouldn't have made that decision, I shouldn't have done this, you're just repeating the story that you're not good with money and you can't make good decisions. So if you can forgive yourself about whatever that is, because in a lot of ways, and again, this is one place where people don't see it, a lot of times these beliefs about debt are perpetuating that story and you just can't see it. You don't believe that it can necessarily happen, that you can have more money. So you try and figure out how to make it happen. And this rarely works when it doesn't come from a place, when you don't change the story and then have the outcome and the final, the next chapters change because you've changed the story title and you've changed the story. It often doesn't work because even if you figure out the how, you still have the same story. You're still the same character living the same story. So often, even if there's a brilliant idea or there's something amazing, if your story isn't in alignment with creating successful experiences for you in terms of money, whatever the brilliant idea won't work. And you can relate this. You probably heard tons of stories about, there's always stories of people investing in the stock market and making tons of money. And there's stories of people losing money, right? And there's people who invest in real estate and make tons of money and others who don't. And it don't necessarily, you can say it comes down to timing or it comes down to knowledge or it comes down to all this stuff. But I would say that the thing that precludes all of that is the story. The story leads you to get the knowledge you need because you're fulfilling a story that you're good with money. And so when you live from that story, you're making different decisions. You're doing things differently. You're more patient, maybe, so that you wait for the better deals instead of just jump on into these opportunities where you think you'll make money. So the story matters even more than the investment or the business or the opportunity or whatever it is. And here's one that I've recently come to realize that a lot of people are doing that's impacting writing their money story. They're trying to write this epic novel from the beginning instead of like a children's book. A children's story is short and it's simple and, there's something that happens and there's a moral and it all wraps up very nicely, right? It doesn't take hundreds and hundreds of pages. But so often when people set out to change their money story, they go for this whole novel and they want to just dive into it when the easiest way, I think, to change your money story is really to think of it like a children's story. The simpler, the better. And if you haven't trained yourself to notice when it's working, when your story is changing, you can't keep writing the new story. So part of it is, you don't write the whole story at the beginning. You choose a direction. You choose how you're going, and we're going to talk about how to put this all together. But you get clear and you write the story as you grow, and then you keep writing the next chapter and the next chapter. But if you don't notice that it's working and that your story is changing, you'll keep writing that same old story. You won't take those new parts of the story and create the next chapter. You'll just create the default next chapter. So what will make it easier to change your money story? I've always found that following a system makes it easier to change anything, or do anything for that matter. So if you are going to write a story, a fiction story, often you'll go pull up the hero's journey, because this is how we have told stories for centuries. And that's a system. There's this call to be something greater, there's this refusal, and then there's this acceptance, and there's going, and then there's coming back and sharing the knowledge. And once you learn that, you see it everywhere. I remember watching Guardians of the Galaxy and going, oh my gosh, there's the refusal part of the story, right? Because there's a system, and so it creates stories that we like. So anytime you can have a system, I think it makes it easier to change, because there's a next step and a next step. The other thing that makes it easier to change is starting with an intention that you can see as possible and growing from there. And this ties back into that epic novel versus children's story. So if you can set an intention that can come true, and you can see it's possible, and you can have that experience of success, then you can continue to write another chapter and another chapter. Remember, we talked about in the beginning how this story, you have this story, and then you create experiences which confirm the story, so it ingrains the story, and then you have more experiences like it. But if you can start with an intention that's, you can see as possible to change, and then you get at that different experience, you can build on that, because you're having a different experience. So then you can create a different story, which creates a different experience, which creates a better story. Also, having support. Having support in changing your money story, I think, is key, because who you're surrounded with matters when you're trying to change. Because if it's the same old, they're going to want it to be the same old. Rarely do you have everyone in your life agree to, actually, I'd love to see if someone ever tried this, called a meeting and said, hey, I'm going to write a new money story. So here's what I would like to talk about. Here's how I'd like you all to support me. This is the characteristics I want to have. These are the kind of discussions I want to have. Called a meeting with all their friends. I wonder if that would work. But nobody generally does that. And so, whether it's your friends, your family, whatever, oftentimes there's not support for this new story because it's new, because you created a lot of the people that are around you, and you also created the way that they interact with you based on your current story. So when you start changing, they're not always on board in the beginning. So having support to change can be huge. And the Manifest 10K system teaches you that. It starts with the intention that your brain can process and get on board with. So manifesting $10,000. Because if you can start to create your children's version of your money story, your new money story, in this space of creating $10,000, you can take that story and you can build on it to create $100,000. And what's next? It's a system that goes step by step through 8 steps. It's designed to lay the foundation before building the house. The more I do this work, the more I realize so many people just start building the house. Which is, again, it's just start writing chapters before you've come up with a title and a main character and all these things. You start building the house without laying the foundation. And if there's not a solid foundation under a house, it'll crumble. if there's not a solid, story plan, outline, creation, all of this, it crumbles. It doesn't work to change it. And if it falls apart, you're obviously not creating a new one. The other thing Manifest 10K does is it easily increases your positive beliefs about money. This is the sneaky way you get your brain on board, is by increasing those positive beliefs, just kind of filtering those in, right? It has built-in support if you choose to take advantage of it. There's a Facebook group for you can be supported by other people who do that. If you want to take advantage of that, and I'm going to talk to you about how to get even more support. And it supports the changing of your brain to create lasting success. It's really builds that foundation to create that lasting success. It's really building, a new story, not taking an old story and rewriting it, because that generally doesn't work. And if it works for a little bit of time. It works until you get up against something really big. And that can be something big, really positive, or something really big, negative. So, when you take a story and you have a short-term change, right? And you don't build for lasting success of your new story. You just sort of, maybe pull out one chapter and insert another. When you come up against something big, like getting a large sum of money, your old story, if it isn't built on that foundation of success, will often come back and take over because this is a new, bigger thing. And the same thing happens if it's a negative thing. That old money story will come back if it hasn't been built for lasting success. The intention of Manifest 10K is to manifest $10,000 in the next 90 days. And here's the steps that you got to do it. I'll give them to you right now. You don't even have to join anything. If you've already been through, you can check, these are the steps. Did I do the steps? Did I fully commit to them? Number one is to get clear about what you want. So what I'm talking about is $10,000. Get clear about what you want so that you know where you're going. You know where that, this first version of the story is ending, right? Maybe this chapter, whatever. You want to identify your abundance feelings. So often people skip this, right? This is part of the foundation, building that foundation, instead of just going straight into the things, building the house without a foundation. This is like taking the time, really identifying your abundance feelings in terms of your story. Is if you're writing like fiction, or it's about, the tone, what tone are you using? What are the themes that are flowing through? That's what identifying your abundance feelings are and how it translates to your story. You got to focus on what you want. You got to get clear about what it is and where you're going and what's your outcome. And then you have to learn to write this part of the story. And again, when I'm going through these steps, when you do these steps in order, you naturally start writing a new story. So I am suggesting that it's easier, because I've done it both ways. It's easier to actually sit down and follow a system that's laid out and have your story naturally evolve than it is to just sit down right now and say, I'm going to write a new story. Because if you just sit down and write a new story, you haven't done any of the foundational stuff. You know what you want, but you don't know a lot of the things to put in it. You don't know those character arcs. You don't know the characters. You don't know all those things to put in it. But when you follow a process and you do number 4 and you practice allowing money into your life, that's allowing different experiences. That in itself, especially when you've done the first 3 steps, is automatically creating a new money story. And then you create your new money beliefs way down in the process. And those money beliefs help solidify that story and move that story forward. These are the things that really help move it and take it to the next level. But again, if you try and create your money beliefs just right off the bat, there's no foundation for them. But creating them after you've done everything else as, something that you're weaving into the story really helps. And then you create your new money persona. So you've laid this foundation, and then you can understand who your character is. And this happens when you're really writing a novel. Like you start and you know some things about your character, or anything, improv as well. You get on stage and you pick a character and you know a few characteristics about them. But as you go through the process of being on stage or writing the novel or the novella, you learn who this character really is. Often you find out things about them in the middle of writing that you didn't know or you couldn't have foreseen in the beginning. You know, when I wrote my novella, I remember at certain points asking, like, why did this character change in this moment? And getting the answer, you know, almost from the character. And that's what happens when you start, you know, so you build this foundation, you start writing with some sense of the character, right? It's you with more money. But then you go on to create this whole new money persona into the story and get the real depth of this character. And you can relate this even if you haven't written a fiction story or performed improv. Um, when you read fiction, right, in the beginning you get some hints of the character, but as the story evolves, you get the depth and you get who this person really is. And that's what happens when you're creating your new money story. When you create your new money persona at this place, which is towards the end, you're getting that depth of who they are so that you can step more into them, which brings in number 7, which is to integrate your money persona into your life. Once you know that depth, you can start to bring that more into your life. And that's number 7. And as you do it this way, so you really build that foundation, steps 1 to 5, and then you start to get the depth of the character and you start to build on it and really create the depth of your new money story. When you do it this way, this is what creates lasting. Because this doesn't allow your brain to get you off course. It's because it's kind of sneaky in a good way. We're just sort of building that foundation, weaving it in, and then we're saying, okay, now let's get deeper on this character. And then you can integrate your money persona into your life and then really step into the experience, which solidifies your new money story. And when you do it this way, the story naturally evolves itself. Like it becomes more and more a new positive money story until, you know, you create something that's awesome. So what else do you need to be successful besides these steps? You got to track what's happening. So, you know, and you do this if you're writing a story too. It's like, oh, you know, so-and-so met so-and-so in the first chapter. So that if you happen to bring that character back in, you're not introducing them, right? So when you're creating and you're going through this process, which is the Manifest 10K process, in order to create a new money story naturally, you got to track what's changing. You have to honor when more money is showing up. Even if it's somebody buying you coffee and that seems simple, or it's getting a $20 refund on your car insurance, you have to track that so that you can see and your brain knows this story is changing. This is I picked up a different book. You ever picked up a book and you start reading and you're like, this is kind of like something I've read before, but then you get to a point and you're like, oh, it's totally different, right? That's what's happening as you build this new story. And is when you track what's happening, it's saying, oh, this is a different story. This is different. Yeah, it feels a little like that book I read 5 years ago, but it's not at all, because here's what's different. Because you pick out the things that are different. Changing your money story basis is celebrate early and often, because you're celebrating different things. You're celebrating that change. You don't have to acknowledge like I'm changing my money story. That's kind of fun. But you know, when you celebrate what's showing up different in your life, you're highlighting that. You're highlighting that you're now in a different experience, which is then going to help you write that next chapter of your story differently than you have before. And these things help you increase the belief that money shows up in unexpected ways. So when you're celebrating that, and you need ways to get your brain on board with this. This is really one thing that solidifies changing your money story in a way that feels good and is a little bit sneaky to your brain, is by finding stories where money shows up unexpectedly. I give this in the Manifest 10K course. I think it's huge. I know it's huge. It's what I did when I wanted to believe that my story didn't have to be, I have to work really hard for money. I have to work long, hard hours for money. I went and I found ways that I went and found stories of people who didn't have to work long, hard hours, so that it increased my belief of how money came into people's life. This is Maggie, and she manifested $20,000 more time and more freedom from a little bit of coaching that I gave her. Like, remember I said that, the forest, you can't see the forest through the trees. I just asked her, what if there was more than enough one day? And she realized that, maybe she had only been telling the story she had just enough, and that had been creating her entire life, and including what happened with time and freedom. So two of the biggest things that you've learned today is why you might not have been successful changing your money story in the past. And that it's possible, and there's a system to help you change your money story. And following a system makes it so much easier. And you don't even have to tell your brain that you're changing your money story. You can just follow the system. I know that you're here because you want to experience more money in your life. You're ready to change your money story because you've had it for long enough. There's so much more that is possible, and you're ready to receive all the good stuff, including more money. Changing your money story changes every part of your life. Now that you know how to change your money story, if you want help doing that, there's two options. So there's Manifest 10K, which is pay after you manifest. So you can get started changing your money story today. You can have step-by-step guidance with daily emails, recordings, that support of a Facebook group, and you can start for $1 with the agreement and on the honor system that you pay 10%. You pay after you manifest more money into your life. And basically you're agreeing, again, on the honor system to pay 10% of what you manifest. So when you manifest $10,000 in 90 days, you're saying, yep, I will pay $1,000 for that knowledge. And so for some people, all they need is the steps. When those steps become clear, I interviewed somebody the other day, and all she needed was those steps to put in place to manifest $10,000 in 24 hours. And many people are successful simply just following the steps. So I've been kind of studying this, and I found that people who are successful on their own are generally very disciplined. They're very self-aware. Maggie, I mentioned I did some coaching, but she was also a trained and experienced coach. They've had experience with coaching before, so they're a little more aware of being able to see their forest for the trees, They're good at seeing where they are getting in their own way. And but this twice, they can see where they're getting in their own way, because this is probably the most important. I was reviewing these slides before, and I thought I hadn't put that on there. And it's super important, and probably the thing that most defines if somebody can be successful just sort of in a DIY following the steps on their own is whether or not you can see where you're getting in your own way. And I want to highlight these because I think it's important for us to know who we have to be in order to be successful in certain situations. And I've become more and more aware of this as I've been studying who's successful in this course and who kind of falls off after day 12. So if you feel like you've got this and you haven't joined the course yet, you can just head over to manifest10k.com and start today. Just follow the process, and what will happen is you will naturally change your money story because it's set up to change your money story for the good and for the permanent. If this all sounds great, but you haven't been successful in DIY programs before, or maybe you've tried Manifest 10K before, but you haven't been able to stick with it, stay here. Here's some reasons that I see people get stuck in the program after having done this with so many people. Money is a big deal. Again, going back to that thing we talked about, why it's harder to change your money story is because money has such an impact on so many moments of our life that it's easy to get off track because there's so many opportunities to get off track. Again, unlike the parking spot, right? That there's not a lot of opportunities to get off on that, get off track on that parking spot situation. Fear really stops people from going forward. And whether this is a conscious or it's just something in the back of their mind that creates something so that they can't go forward, there's fear that comes up with money. And again, because it feels so important, and it is important. I'm not saying it's not important, but it carries a bigger weight than other things in our life, which makes it harder to change sometimes. And that makes that fear bigger, and it makes our brain go, I don't know what to do. We can survive like we are right now. I don't know what it looks like to be bigger and better. I don't know what it looks like to have a different money story. I think people get stuck because there's the opportunity, because we're dealing with money. It's big stuff. Again, it's lifelong. It impacts all of our lives. There's an opportunity for big stuff to come up. And so what I see is that people, when there's something big on the other side, your brain is going to protect you. And so it resists and often leads you to the path to quit. It takes a lot of determination sometimes if there's something big that needs to come out, to keep pushing through. Because, I had a client, and she would always say to me, she'd say, when I'm getting ready to come to you, and this was years ago, she goes, so much stuff hits me that week. She's like, why does everything fall apart after I schedule an appointment with you? And I said, because your body mind system knows it's going to be safe to put all this stuff out on the table, and somebody's going to be able to help you handle it. Right? Versus if that just came up on any normal Tuesday, you don't have an appointment scheduled with me on Thursday, you're going to really fall apart. And I think that's what happens. Everybody starts with the best of intentions to be able to complete the course. But when there's something big on the other side, often your brain just won't let you go there, because you need support to change your story. You need that support for whatever that is. And it doesn't even have to be huge or monumental what's on the other side. We're talking about changing a lifelong story. And so often people get stuck because they really need support. They just, even knowing that there's somebody there to more or less catch you or help you get back up if you come across something that doesn't feel good, that will allow you to go deeper. And I think that's why, a lot of people get stuck and quit, is because there's something big to break through, but their body mind system isn't going to let them do it without knowing that there's some support for that breakthrough, because breakthroughs often feel like breaking apart and falling apart. So Michelle was one of those people. She just couldn't do it on her own. Prior to support, she never finished the course. And I promised I wouldn't tell how many times she started it. But with support, Michelle graduated from survival mode. And those are her words. I graduated from survival mode. Talk about a new story, right? Leaving that story of survival behind and being able to start writing that story of thriving in life. Of course, when you have that, when you graduate from survival mode and you have a different story that says I'm thriving, you work less and you make more. That impacts how you feel. Michelle feels safe and secure about money. She lets go of what doesn't serve her, including weight. When she fixed her money story, the weight just kind of started coming off. She's more confident, right? I talked about how you then develop your money persona. It naturally evolves as you create a better story. Michelle is confident in a way that she has never been confident before, because she's got this money thing. She's been number 2 in recruiting with her MLM business. Number 2. And maybe the most important thing is that she makes empowered decisions about what she's paying for. Empowered decisions, remember? Because your story plays out in everything. So every time she didn't make an empowered decision, that just rewrote her story. And then that created the next opportunity for her to make a non-empowered decision. But now when she makes an empowered decision, because that's her story, she's confident about money, she feels safe and secure, so she makes empowered decisions. And then that continues to write the next chapter of her story about how good she is with money, and about how she can thrive, and about how she makes good decisions with money. And sometimes having somebody by your side makes all the difference, especially when you're writing a new money story. When you're creating that for yourself, I just see it more than more. I've been doing this. The Manifest 10K course, originally Money, 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 has been around for a little over 3 years. And I've seen what having support, and, at certain points, I've had more time than others. And what I've realized is that there are people, like I was just talking about Eliza, who just got the steps out of the book, Manifest 10,000. She manifested, $10,000 in 24 hours. Because she just needed the steps, and some people are like that. But what I've learned is that so often people need somebody by their side to make a difference in writing this new money story. Like I said, for Maggie, I pointed out something was possible that she hadn't been able to see on her own. And that really made this shift of manifesting $20,000 and changing her money and her life story. And it really did. Like when you change your money story, your whole life story changes. It's that piece, it's the linchpin. It changes everything. Again, which makes total sense because money impacts everything in our lives, whether you want it to or not. Whether you try and escape it, I always say like money impacts you. Even if you go off grid, you probably had to at some point save money to buy that land and buy the solar panels to go off grid. So it impacts everybody's life because that's just who we are. And so that's why when you change your money story, it changes your life story. And that's why there's a new option to get the support you need to change your money story. And it's called Manifest 10K with Support. It's the Manifest 10K course in all of its glory that has been proven to work and help people welcome. I've always been excited when people welcome 2, 3, 4, 5, and I'm also excited when people manifest more than $10,000. But I would say the majority of people manifest less. And I'm okay with that. I'm excited about that because I know they are changing their story. But I really want people to hit that big number and start changing their story faster and really stick with it. Because I think sometimes, when you hit those lower numbers, sometimes you can slip back. But when you really hit that $10,000 intention, something shifts. So Manifest 10K with Support has the Manifest 10K course. It has weekly group calls with me to celebrate because that's number one in changing your money story. So that's where we'll start. But also to make sure you're noticing progress. And this is important because so often I'll work with a client and they'll say like, nothing's working. But they've told me all this stuff at the beginning of the call that's changed. And I'll go, well, hold on. Just a month ago, you told me you wanted A, B, C, D, and E, and you just got A, B, C, and D. And they're like, oh, I forgot. Because sometimes we have to, part of changing our story is becoming that person, that character that sees how things are changing. So I'll help you notice the progress when you don't see it. And you got to get your questions answered. That's not an option in the Manifest 10K course. Like there's so many resources that if you want to do it on your own, I feel like I've given you all of the answers. You just have to go seek them out. But if you want to be able to, when you come up against a question and you want to get the answer immediately, this support, that's what this is for. You also get 3 individual calls with me so that you make sure you're writing the best money story possible, so that we make sure, A, I'm giving that opportunity for those big shifts to happen, supporting you, in the way I was able to ask Maggie that question, well, what if there was more than enough, right? And so that you're getting all the support you need to write this new story. And there's 3 individual calls now. I don't know that that'll always be there. That's there now. I always reserve the right to change my mind. So I always like to say that. And then there's an intimate group for celebration and support, because celebrating and being supported by that new support system is huge in your money story being changed. Because it's different things happening, which means, tells your brain, oh, this is a different story, right? And the investment is $1,000 up front. So, it's the 10% of your $10,000 intention, but you pay it up front. And that just says we're serious. It says you'd like some of my time to help and you're serious about finishing the course. So it lets me know that I'm going to make the time investment in you to support you. There's accountability built in. There's a lot of things. And, the question I would ask yourself if you're like, I really want to do this, and this is the question I would honestly ask myself, 5 years ago, would be like, do I think I can manifest $1,000? And if I thought for sure, without a doubt, I can manifest $1,000, I'd be all in. And I'm not saying you have to make that choice. I'm just telling you who I was and what I would have done. And that's the way my brain works. I would have been like, okay, yeah. Do I think for sure if I have a coach's help, I can manifest $1,000, then I'd be all in. And that's just the way I made decisions. So I've also worked with Laura, and she invested $1,000 up front. She successfully manifested $10,000 in 90 days. One of the cool things that happened is once she made that investment, she expected to manifest the money. Like she was determined, and not in a way that she was trying to control the how, but she was so intent on looking and making sure she saw every opportunity that was coming her way, that she wrote down everything. And she was more in tune with her success because she paid up front. She was just, that was her expectation because she had made that investment up front. And it was super fun to watch because it is a different, there was a different type of energy. And part of it is that I got to be in communication with her more because I was supporting her with this process. So I got to hear it, and I got to hear the excitement. Like, I'm almost there. I'm at $9,600 and 70 cents. And so it was very fun to watch that process. And she manifested over $10,000. So with support, you will learn how to manifest $10,000 in 90 days. You'll keep going when you want to quit, because I'll be there to say keep going in a very gentle way. If you need gentle and support, or if you need a little more forceful encouragement, I'll be there for that as well. You will see more progress because I'm going to reflect that back to you. And if you're on this call, you know what you focus on grows. And so when you have somebody to remind you and to reflect back and say, like, this is changing, this is changing, this is changing, this happened, this money showed up. Remember this opportunity that came, remember this big evidence. When you have somebody reminding you of that, you see more of it because your focus naturally grows in that direction. And therefore, more of it comes. And you also learn that skill on your own when you have somebody else helping you and supporting you in that way. Obviously, there's no guarantees, but you'll likely manifest $10,000 in 90 days or close to it. I'm always amazed. There's oftentimes people that will manifest their 10,000 at like day 95, day 100, even if, it's 6 months following the program and $10,000 shows up, but you created it, it's going to be awesome. There's nothing like knowing you created it. And I'd love to help you. So heads up, right now there's only, I'm taking 10 people from this program and there's 5 spots remaining. Obviously this is more time. You're getting individual time with me. You're getting another call, and y'all know I love my time freedom, and I love to hang out at the pool as much as I love hanging out with you. So there's only so much time available on my calendar, and that's why these are the way they are. To claim your spot, simply go to manifest10ksupport.com. And I will be there to get you started. Today is the last day. So the program starts today. If you want in, this is, I wasn't going to do this, but I decided, I wanted to offer it to you. So the program starts today. And if you're in, you're in. If not, then that's okay. But it's not one of those things where it's like, I want to think about it. Like I said, I wasn't going to do this. I was just going to close it down with who we have and go forward and love on them. But something inside me this afternoon, wouldn't let me do that. So somebody's out there wanting this, I know, because I couldn't not do this. So, that is where we are at. So I'll take questions. I'm just going to go ahead and